As we begin the course, we want to look at sort of a oversight of what we're going to be doing. So in chapter 1, the authors give you a little bit of information about how to think about the field of statistics and sort of their thought process a little bit. You can see, and we're just sort of laying the foundation to sort of begin. So in chapter 1, what I want to do is give you a definition of what the field of statistics might represent. So it's a way to sort of investigate the world around us based on collecting information and then using well-defined, well-used methods from reason to sort of investigate what information, that data, those characteristics tell us. So you can think of it as sort of like a science dealing with collecting, summarizing, drawing conclusions, and making judgments based on observations. Now, statistics are numerical summaries or calculations, if you want to think of it like that, based on collected data. Now, there's various subjects that you've been exposed to in your lifetimes, and those things should bring about certain ideas or thoughts. So, for example, when somebody mentions biology, you may think about studying life currently as it is. That may be studying plants, it may be studying animals that we see, but it's some type of study of life. Paleontology, okay, what is that? Well, that's typically thought of as studying life that has existed before current life. Most of the time when you hear paleontology, you think about people who study dinosaur bones and dinosaur fossils. What about economics? When you see economics, you probably think of money. Okay, how do you invest money? How do you save money? How do you make a budget? Well, what about statistics? When you hear the word statistics, what should you think of? Well, really, in statistics, what we focus on is the term variation. So the idea is we're going to be able to measure certain characteristics, but then what we really want to get a grasp on is, okay, how much could that value change? How much variability is there if I went out and replicated the same study or did the same thing over again? I'm not always going to get the same result. And that's what we sort of study in statistics. Now, in chapter 2, your authors go on to talk about their thought process, and you have to really be reading to pull this out in this textbook. But basically on page 15, they go through and tell you the 3 rules of data analysis, and that's sort of their process as they go throughout the book. But I want to go ahead and pull it back here and talk about it a little bit. Now, on page 15, it begins with make a picture for points 1, 2, and 3, but what they're really doing is talking about think, show, and tell. So anytime you have an exercise you're looking at, you want to think about what's being studied. How is the data being obtained? Where are you heading? What is it you wish to learn? So you really want to think about what the question is asking, what information is provided, and how are you going to get from where you're at to where you want to go. Number 2 is showing. Okay, so this a lot of times is taking what you have, the observations or the data, and then trying to use that to make graphs, to perform some calculations, and do sort of the mechanics to get at that point where you can then start to answer that question. And then finally, the tail part is what did you discover? Summarize what you did, how you went about it, and then what your findings are. Now, students always want to know, how can you be successful in a course like this? A lot of people think the course is going to be hard, and sometimes it can be a challenge. But number 1, you have to prepare yourself, and there are certain things that you can do. Number 1, read the book. The authors actually do a very good job of adding humor into the book. Matter of fact, if you look on the first page, chapter 1, stats starts here. Notice there's a 1, so there's a footnote. On page 1, there's a footnote. Now, what does the footnote say? Well, down at the bottom it says, we were thinking of calling this chapter Introduction, but nobody reads the introduction, and we wanted you to read this. We feel safe admitting this down here in the footnotes. Now, why would they feel safe admitting that? Because nobody reads footnotes either. So don't just rush through to get reading done, but actually look around the book and think about all the different things that the authors have taken time to put into the book. And it actually can be quite fun. So you may be reading along and they'll interject some humor, and it gives you a little bit of a mental break. And that's actually a good thing. Okay, what else? Well, sort of come to class, right? Except in an online class, you don't have a formal class. So what does that mean? Well, you've got to spend time watching the videos. Okay, and the good thing about an online class is it's all recorded. So if you need to stop and go get a drink or go to the restroom or something, hey, you can hit that pause button and go do that, come back, pick up where you left off. Or maybe you watch the video and you think, I don't think I really paid attention the whole time. My mind was wandering, I was distracted. You can go back and rewatch it. Okay, so you actually have quite an advantage in an online class because you can go back and rewatch these videos. Do all the homework questions. Okay, the homework is not just the instructor trying to be mean, but it's trying to give you practice so that you understand the material and that you become comfortable. If you're trying to learn to play golf, you don't get better by watching other people play golf. You have to go out and hit golf balls. If you want to learn to catch a ball as a child, growing up playing football or baseball, you have to go out and catch passes or catch fly balls or field ground balls. You have to practice yourself. And just because you're done with the homework doesn't mean that you have to be done. You can go back and rework other exercises. Look in the book. You can go pick up a book from a library maybe and work other questions where you've got the answers and you can check your work or something. So don't think that the homework is all that you have to do. If you still feel like you need more practice, take advantage of resources that you have. I also will mention that as you're going through the notes and stuff, when we get into some of the exercises where I'm working through calculations or something, you really need to be sitting down writing those things out too. Something about our minds and the way math works is if we're just watching somebody else do it, it doesn't really sink in. You need to be writing the steps down. You need to be doing the calculations on your calculator. And that'll really help you to understand what you're doing. And if there are any mistakes or any misconceptions, we can catch those hopefully before test time. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay, asking questions is how you learn and how you're going to be successful in this course. So if you don't understand something, don't be afraid to pose questions, either in a discussion board setting if you choose to do that, in emails to me or to other people or whatever. We will try to have some online office hours where we'll have some videos set up, so just keep in mind that there's going to be chances to ask questions. Okay. Technology, the MyStatLab software, has the book in electronic format with some videos from the authors. So we'll, from time to time, mention, hey, go watch this video from the author. Watch those. They give examples, snapshots of what the chapters may cover. They'll work through exercises, giving you some examples. And then basically just keep working on stuff until everything is perfect. Okay. Let's go on and talk a little bit about the content a little more in Chapter 1. So what we want to do is put things that are gathered into some type of context. So data, you want to think about, are values of some sort within a context. So how do we grasp the context? Well, what we've got to do is be sort of like an investigator and consider what are called the W's. Well, except for the word how, the W's at the end. But all the other ones begin with W's. So that's what a lot of people do, is say consider the W's. So the who in a study, or if it's not really people, it probably should be which, but the people are the items that you're going to examine in a study. So each of these is considered a case in the most generic sense. Now in different studies, people use different terminologies. You may hear people called research subjects, respondents, participants. Maybe you're looking at customers if you're looking in a store. Maybe you're looking at businesses or organizations or companies. Maybe if you're tracking expenses across time, maybe you're looking at periods or quarters or something. You can look at fiscal years. So there's a lot of different terms that are used, but basically each segment for which you collect information is considered a case or one of these other terms. So in a data file, it probably would be a different row in an Excel spreadsheet. Now the what is the specific thing you record about each person or each item. So if we're looking at, say, NKU students, well, the who may be all, say 16,000 NKU students that we're interested in, and maybe we take a sample. Maybe we randomly pick out 500 of those. The what would be what we measure about each one. Maybe we're looking to see how many hours are they taking in the current semester. Maybe we look at their home address and see how far from campus their official home address is in the database or something. So whatever it is that we're recording about each person is the what. Now the why answers basically, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of doing this anyway? How are you going to use this? And what that will do is help you determine the proper way to treat the data. Depending on how the data is collected and what you want to answer is going to sort of help you figure out what you should do with that data to get to that question that you want to answer. And then some of the other stuff, a lot of times it's left out, especially in textbook questions and stuff. But if possible, in a full study, you want to be able to identify this information. Where? Okay, from what source were the data obtained? If I'm talking about getting records of students, then maybe I want to know, okay, how did you do that? Did you go to the MyNKU system? Did you go to paper files somewhere? Did you ask? Did you just survey students when they were waiting in line at the bookstore? How did you get this information? What about the when? Okay, are these current values? Am I talking about students that are enrolled right now? Am I talking about students that were enrolled last year at NKU? Am I talking about students that were enrolled back in 1985? Okay, are the characteristics from a distant time or place? What if we're looking at economic figures? Okay, we want to know about household incomes. Well, if I'm recording household incomes from people living in Mexico or Canada, that's very different than what I might want to figure out about people who live in Kentucky. Or maybe I want to know about people in this region in northern Kentucky. So if my data was collected from people in southeastern Kentucky or western Kentucky, that data would not be relevant to talk about people who live in northern Kentucky because it's a different region. So those are things to keep in mind. And what about the how? What method was used to collect the information? If you're looking at a TV show where they ask you to send a text in to vote for somebody, or if you're looking at restaurant data where you have comment cards that you can fill out, those are things that sort of help you figure out, okay, what type of customers might be filling this out. Another one that's sort of popular is ratemyprofessor.com. And I'm not saying that it's completely useless to look at comments on there, but we teach, say, 200 students a semester, and you may have 5 of them fill out a ratemyprofessor.com comment about the course they took and the instructor. Do you really think 5 out of 200 is going to give you an overview of all the different opinions in a class? Typically what happens with those voluntary response things is, oh, this was a great person, you should take this person, or this person was horrible. You get the extremes, and it may be just one little thing that happened. So out of the 30 or 40 days that you're spending with students in a typical face-to-face class, there may have been one word, one sentence, one dispute that you had, and then that student gives a very negative view. Or maybe everything was going sort of so-so, and then you did one thing to sort of turn a student's semester around, a word of encouragement, a smile, or something, and they may give you a gleaming review, right? Well, yeah, but I'm not sure that that's the case for every student. So keep in mind that all of these questions are going to tie into how useful your data is, whether it's appropriate, can you answer the question that you want to based on how the data was collected. So it's very important to grasp the context in each exercise. Okay. Now, we often collect a few observations. So for example, I want to know something about NKU students. And let's say that I don't have access to a database. I don't have permission to use all student records. Well, then maybe what I do is I just go ask a few students, okay, what county do you live in, or how many hours are you taking this semester? Well, the information I get, those few responses, is considered a sample. It's a set of cases, right, the who or the which that we're talking about in a study, but it's not exhaustive. It doesn't cover every person or everything that I could measure. The set of everything that could be measured would be, or I probably shouldn't use the word measured there, everything that I could investigate and collect characteristics about. That's considered the population. So if I'm looking at current NKU students, let's say that that's 16,000 different people. That might be my population, whereas the sample may be 500 students that somehow I let the computer randomly pick out for a study. So keep in mind that what we're going to do a lot of times is look at sample data and then use it to try to make a judgment about what's happening in the population without really being able to measure the whole population. Okay, the last thing we're going to cover for this chapter are sort of the two big distinctions in the variables that we can collect. Okay, now categorical data consist of characteristics or variables which fall into categories. Typically these are labels, and all we're going to do is count how many observations belong in each category. So with categorical data, you may have things like gender. Okay, well, what would gender responses be? Well, the typical ones are male and female, right? And then you classify people based on that gender. Do you consider yourself male? Do you consider yourself female? Other things could be, okay, what county are you currently residing in? Okay, well, Kenton County, Campbell County, Boone County. Those are the three most common, northern Kentucky counties. And then you, of course, have, Bracken and the other counties, Gallatin and around. You have counties in southeastern Indiana. You have some up in Ohio where students come. And then you've got some that are really distant that you would have to look up to even figure out, okay, what state is this county in? But the responses are words. Now, one drawback is that don't always think that the responses have to be words, because there's other things that are categorical. For example, the numbers of courses. Stat 205, the 205. Well, what about stat 212? Okay, it's a different course, obviously. Is 212 a lot harder than 205? It's a bigger number. What about a course like Math 129? 129 is smaller than 205 or 212. Does that mean it's easier? Not really. So you've got to be careful because things that look like numbers, 205, 212, 129, may really be names of categories. Another example may be things like zip codes, right? 41051 versus 29605. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you it's two different zip codes, but other than that, okay, it doesn't tell you anything about elevation, doesn't tell you anything about really population, okay? So you've got to be careful because things that may look like numbers may not be measuring anything. So there's the distinction, is measurement. So if it's just categorizing, it's going to be categorical, or sometimes called qualitative data. A couple of other names you may hear are nominal and ordinal. Nominal are things that are just names and you can't really order them. Ordinal is categorical data where you can put things in order. Clothes sizes for boys, for example. You may have small, medium, large, extra large. Those are names. They don't really measure anything except for general size relative to each other. A small shirt takes less material, right, than a large shirt, for example. So you can order things, but it's not really like height or weight where you can take differences, right? Large minus small, does that equal medium? Okay, you can't really do that stuff. So that's your categorical data. Now, quantitative data is basically everything else, and what we really will spend most of our time on this semester. But with quantitative data, your variables are numerical values, so they're going to be numbers, but they also measure some characteristics, or they're trying to capture some amount. So as such, they're going to be numbers that also include units. Now, it could be, okay, how much did you spend on gas this last week? Right, so that would be a number, and dollars, okay, dollars and cents would be your units of measurement. It could be weight. Okay, how much do you weigh? Well, then you're measuring probably in pounds or kilograms if you're in an international country. Those would be sort of common units of measure. So hopefully that gets you started. What we're going to do is start in the next couple of chapters talking about if we have categorical data, what can we do with it? And if we have quantitative data, what can we do with that? And then move on from there.